All right, welcome back to the Battery Podcast with your hosts, Joe Beimel and Brent Dean, powered by Beimel Elite Athletics. We've got locations in Los Angeles and in El Paso, Texas. Basically, everything you need to be a good baseball player. If you want to throw harder, hit harder, be a great pitcher, be a great hitter, be a great infielder, whatever it is, get really strong, it's a place to go. On today's episode, we're going to talk about something that's kind of fired me up this week. And, I know that this has been going on for a long time, but for some reason this past week, I have seen like some insane shit that coaches are doing at the high school level and even at the college level. And parents are just kind of letting it go and letting it happen. And that's just young athletes. And we're not talking about athletes like a guy who plays baseball just for fun. Obviously everybody plays baseball for fun, but, guys that maybe after their senior year, they're never going to play baseball again. We're not talking about those guys. We're talking about guys that have futures in the game. Whether that's at the D1 level, any college level, or possibly, could be draft guys at some time or play professionally, play in the big leagues. These kids are just being freaking abused by coaches that are doing anything to win, and there's nothing wrong with winning a game, but you can't sacrifice the health of your players. And I know, Brent, you've been around the game for a long time and you've been in Southern California, and we've had this conversation a little bit this week. I've kind of told you some of these scenarios, and I'm just curious how much of this you have seen, and I'll go into specific details because I'm seriously like mad about it. I made the mistake of downloading Game Changer, and so now I can see box scores and pitch counts and shit, and it's frustrating. But out there in that area, what's your experience with that? And I feel like it happens out there, but I don't know if maybe parents are way more vocal, or have you seen like some crazy stuff with kids, being overused, throwing way too much, or just playing way too much?
Yeah, I definitely have seen it for the past 15 years. The youth travel ball situation, is just ripe for that situation to be very relevant. Like the weather's great. There's so many teams. There's fields everywhere. So there's always games happening, which in one respect is great. I think kids should play baseball as much as possible. They should get out. They should have fun. They should be parts of teams. But when you start talking about like the abuse that's happening on the arms and the amount of games that are being played, I think that's something that's perpetually a conversation with parents that we have, that very often they're not aware of the wear and tear that's going on the kids' bodies. So I would say there's a lot of families that are a little bit more vocal, a little bit more in touch with that risk than maybe 5, 10, or 15 years ago. But the overall number of parents and players that are pitching every week or pitching multiple times a week or pitching every weekend throughout the year has skyrocketed. And I would say that kind of continues even into high school now, where there isn't a ton of accountability on the volume of games that people are playing or the volume of pitches or throwing or just overall high intent work, and the lack of recovery or preparation just to have the capacity to manage that. So it's definitely something that's great for baseball, that there's more baseball being played and it's more available to kids all over the place. But the scary part, and now the stigma, is that the injuries are just skyrocketing. And I think that does really stem from the dynamic of how youth baseball and high school baseball are being ran.
It's pretty insane, some of the things I've seen this week, and I'll go over a couple specific examples. But my cousin, Jesse, he coaches the local high school team, St. Mary's area. That's where I went to school. That's where he went to school. And he does a really good job, with the pitchers, making sure they're not being overused. Yesterday, my cousin Joel pitched, and he was throwing a great game. He pulled him out at like 72 or 73 pitches, and it was like perfect. perfect outing. You could tell he started to get a little bit tired. Stuff just wasn't as good. So he went out, pulled him out. They end up winning the game. But I feel like that is just so rare right now because just in the past couple weeks alone, I watched a kid who's a big kid, right? But he can't even drive yet. So he's like 6'7". His coach pitches him, a bunch of pitches on a Friday, like 40, 50 pitches, takes him out so he can pitch again on Monday. He comes in on Monday and he pitches a bunch of pitches and then he pitches again on Wednesday. And I'm just like, what is going on? And I thought that was bad, but that wasn't even like the worst ones. There's another kid, little guy. He comes in to pitch on a Wednesday, throws I think 20 pitches in the game, doesn't have a good outing, gets pulled pretty quickly. The next day, throws 77 pitches in 4 innings. Like the very next day, back to back days. And, I'm seeing this and I'm going, I wouldn't do that in the big leagues. Like if I was a reliever, I'm not going out there and throwing that many pitches on back to back days. That's ridiculous. So I don't understand why someone would think it is okay for somebody who's 14 years old to do that when full grown, fully developed adults that are getting paid millions of dollars would never do that ever. And I always come back to that conversation is you are not a big leaguer. It doesn't matter. You should not be doing this. And no coach should be doing it to any kids just because you want to win a high school baseball game. It's insane to me. And another example, a kid around the area, pretty good, throws, low 90s as a sophomore in high school. He goes out, throws on one day. I don't know, I guess it was like a Wednesday, 30, 40, and then he throws 40 pitches, around 40 pitches, 2 innings, game gets postponed because of rain, gets rescheduled for Saturday. So he gets Thursday, Friday off, ends up going like total between the 2 days goes 120 some pitches, strikes out 16, walks 5.
Crazy.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's insane. It's
Yeah.
boggling my mind because it's happening over and over and over. And one more example, another kid throws his first start of the year, throws 84, 85 pitches on like a Saturday, this past Saturday. And I talked to him and I say, hey, don't throw before Wednesday, like today. I said, don't throw before Wednesday. That's at least 4 days off. Even that, you should probably have more. You're a high school kid. You should probably wait till Friday, but do not throw until Wednesday. Oh, well, he comes in the game because they needed him yesterday to close out the game. So he gets a couple outs, throws, 10, 12 pitches. But he also threw a bullpen on Monday. You know what I mean? I'm just like, what the hell is happening?
Yeah.
So and I always, like I say, I hate to use this word, but it is a freaking epidemic. And it's starting to really piss me off because the coaches are so irresponsible and they've got to take most of the blame, right? But the parents also, you have to be able to stick up for your kid and tell them enough is enough. You can't just let them go out there. No kid is going to go to an adult and go, hey, I'm not pitching. That just a lot of times comes off terrible, when you're a kid and you're speaking to your coach. But at the same time, you do have to learn how to say no, even in those situations. And there are a lot of coaches that do it right. Even around here, DuBois High School, their head coach is a former pro guy. So he freaking gets it. He was a catcher, Josh Johnson, from around the area. And they've got a really good pitcher, Noah Farrell, who he's D1 committed going to UConn. And he's pitching about once a week. But I don't think he's thrown this season. I don't think he's thrown over 70 pitches like the whole year. And he's having a lot of success and he's being able to get recovered in between starts and then go back out. And, when I talk to the kids, they're always like, oh, well, I was feeling good. It's like, no, you weren't. There's no chance. Like you might think you feel good, but according to what? Like what did you do any kind of testing? Like, show me how you feel like you were recovered after you threw 123 pitches in a 4-day span, So
Yeah.
it's just obviously I'm a little fired up about it. But one of the things I want to ask you is, in your experience with travel ball, with high school, and even coaching. I know you coached like at the travel ball level while you were still playing. What was, and I'm sure you weren't abusing kids like these guys are. But like, how would you go about it? One, as a parent, what would your advice be to parents, to athletes, and even to coaches? I mean, my advice to coaches is freaking clean it up.
Yeah.
It's a debacle. But your advice to like parents and athletes, how you handle that situation when it's just someone is being grossly overused.
Yeah. Yeah. The first thing that a parent has to do is they got to listen to their kid about how they feel. That's part of an athlete's journey, is to understand the difference between some pain, some soreness, and some red flags that might be leading to a bigger issue. It's not very feasible to think that a 10 to 13-year-old or even a 15 to 20-year-old is really aware of those differences yet, and they're starting to learn that process. But that's the first thing, is you have to understand how you feel and then start to see if they're making adjustments that are going to be maybe in a compensation for a weakness or a fatigue or something that's going to be painful for them. Um, Second thing is have some level of accountability with things like game changer, with the pitch count, innings pitched, games played, the volume of the high intent games that are going on, so that you can see if this is a viable usage of time and like it's actually going to be in line with what someone like you or I or a experienced coach might advise against. Um, and then the third thing is also have some level of quantifiable metrics that are going to be based off of their strength, health, their mobility, something that's going to be able to be a quick gauge of trends. So it could be something as simple as velocity. Obviously, it doesn't really matter how hard a 12-year-old is throwing, outside of the understanding that if they're typically at 72 miles an hour and all of a sudden they're down to 64 or 65, they look like they're doing fine, but maybe you've seen that they had a higher volume and now the velo's dropping, or maybe their mechanics look a little different. Those are all red flags that you have to consider. So there's no one thing that you should do. It should be a combination of those. And that's the trick, is because it's such a nuanced process for parents and players to be able to communicate well, evaluate, make adjustments and pivots. Most people don't have a good understanding of how to go through that. So if you have no idea where to start, if even you're a high school athlete and you're not sure how to go about your recovery based off the volume you're throwing, contact us. Like, we can easily help with that process or give you some advice on where you should actually look at your health, your mobility, your mechanics, to give you some parameters so you can always fall back to what's been working for you and then start to get into things that maybe could be easy adjustments if you start getting fatigue. One side note, outside of the travel ball side, and that's obviously a very clear depiction of where the overusage gets done. I see this happen very often with high school athletes going into college. Their freshman year, they're in a new program. The volume of throwing is typically increased, the length of the season increases. And this can resonate a lot with going into a pro season. But specifically here, because we have so many high school athletes that we work with and we mentor, that's one of the first things that we have issues with, is they're throwing 88 or 90 in high school, or even if they're 84, 85, they get into junior college or a D2 or D1 or D3, whatever it may be, the 4-year programs, and the fall kicks their butt. They're doing a lot more running, a lot more conditioning, a lot more throwing. They come back in the winter, they try and pick it back up. Maybe they're away from home for the first time, so the sleep and nutrition cycle has been off. Then they get into the season, and typically they're playing more games, longer games with more innings. They're pitching more, throwing more, just have a higher workload. And it's just a longer season. So one example, we have a kid from Torrance High School, and he pitched, and I was looking this up, he pitched about 30 innings last year, which is a pretty decent amount. Spot starter, came in as a reliever a few times. 30 innings over 12 or 13 appearances is kind of expected for an average high school varsity competition level. This year, he has 12 appearances and he has over 64 innings, I think, 62 possibly. So he's more than doubled the in-game volume he's thrown, but also he did summer ball and he was going high intent all fall, and the winter was much harder workouts, and the expectation on your body and also you're throwing harder is so much higher. So he's starting to have some arm pains, and it's very common. And I think that's where we get a lot of freshmen or even juniors or seniors in high school where they've started to increase their volume of throwing. And that becomes one of the bottlenecks for injuries because then the things start breaking down. Um, but just to circle back to your question, that's the first thing you got to do is have some understanding of pain that's tolerable, what they should feel, how it should really resonate with them, with how their body's actually processing the stress and the workload management. And then numbers, pure volume, throwing, how often, how many days a week, the games, and then some level of health metric. Because if you have none of that, then really you're just shooting blind. And coaches, they're there to win. It's no knock on them. They're doing best they can with the cards they're dealt. And very often, the best players, the most physically advanced players, are going to play the most. And if you don't have a structured system to modify or, I guess, identify some factors in your volume, then you typically are higher risk.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times the rules, there are just rules for tournaments, and each state has different rules, right? You can only pitch this amount. You can only do this amount in this amount of days. I know Pennsylvania, it's like you can only throw 100 pitches a week. Well, then that gets just freaking manipulated out the ass. You just get like a coach will throw, well, I'm going to keep him at 20 pitches this game, and then I'll throw him 20 tomorrow and then 20 the next day. Because if you don't go over 20, you can basically keep pitching. So then the kid never gets a freaking break. And, and same thing in tournaments. It's like we talked about this on here before, where you get a kid pitching at 8 a.m. and then they pitch at 5 p.m. on the same day just because the rules allow it. So I think we really need to look at that. We need to get some people in there that are making the rules that are actually helping athletes stay healthy. You can't continue to let this stuff happen. And it starts there for sure, because like you brought it up earlier, the coaches, yeah, they're trying to win. And a lot of them are trying to win at the risk of somebody getting injured that has a chance to go on and play baseball at a high level. So, and with what you said as well, because they are the best players. So it's like, well, we need them. And the kid wants to be a freaking hero with all of his classmates and his teammates. And, he's not going to turn down a chance to like go out there and save a game that is on the verge of being lost, or they're playing a great team and maybe it's the fifth inning and he should be out of the game. Well, no, we're going to leave him in there for the last two innings. And now he throws over 100 pitches and is super fatigued. And then really the rules allowing that, and it just needs to be common sense. It's like, shouldn't be able to be manipulated. It should be just very clear. And I think, we're firm believers in, I would rather see a guy or pitcher throw 5 innings, 6 innings, even 7 innings, and then have like a week off rather than throw 2 on Monday, 4 on Wednesday, 3 on Friday. That's how you get worn down. And it's the same thing in the big leagues. That's, if you're going multiple days in a row, and I brought this up to a few people when I was in Pittsburgh, when I was, very young in my big league career. I had a time, and maybe I've mentioned this before on here, but I had a period where I was up or in the game 21 out of 23 days. So it means I was either up getting loose, or I was up getting loose and brought into the game. And I was having a really good season. It was 2003. Well, as soon as I hit that period, and I didn't know any better. I'm a big leaguer and I just want to be out there every day and be available for my team. That's just what you did out of the bullpen back in those days. As soon as I went through that, the 2 days that I didn't get up or go in the game were 2 off days. After I had that, my freaking season just plummeted. And I try to tell these kids that because they're like, well, I feel good. It's like, yeah, but that was your first start and you threw 90 pitches. You haven't you haven't pitched all
Yeah.
year. In the first game out the gate, you're throwing 90 pitches. No one does that. Like big leaguers don't even usually do that. And they've been pitching in spring training. And like I said, they're making tens of millions of dollars as a starter. No kid in high school is making that. They're not paying you to do that. So don't let these coaches abuse you. But going back to, I think we just need some rules set in place that maybe, I don't know if they can be universal, but it seems like every state has their own rules. And I think you really got to put an X on this and not allow coaches to manipulate it. And just, if you're a starter, maybe you have one set of rules, you're a reliever, you have another, and you just have to, you have to follow them. And I don't know if that's even being enforced. When I see a kid throwing 120 some pitches in a 3-day span, like, is someone even like looking at this stuff? Like, how do they enforce it? I guess that's another issue. How do you enforce pitch counts and overuse if there's no one there? You would think it's just kind of the honor system or something, but I really don't know. If anyone out there wants to leave a comment, and if you have any if you have any inkling on how this stuff they do this stuff, or if you're part of one of the state athletic commission or whatever for high schools. I don't even know what those are called, but reach out, leave a comment, let us know what that process involves, because it's just, I wanted to talk about it today, and it wasn't necessarily something I think we were planning on talking about. It's just, I watched it for the last 2 weeks and I've just been shocked. But I think a good place to start is educating coaches on, the risks of doing that. So, we'll have to send this to coaches that are currently doing this type of behavior, and even parents. Just, this is going to be something for parents to watch, because I just don't think they understand. I really don't. I don't think they understand that a lot of people are very short-sighted, right? So they're just thinking of the now. Oh, his arm feels good, so he should throw. Or, well, he threw a lot of pitches, but game was on the line. They needed him, and he stepped in and showed some guts or whatever. But they don't realize that that's going to affect him, and it might not even affect him this season. But you continue to do that over and over and over, and that's where, if you do it one time, all right, big deal. But that's not the behavior. It's over and over and over through the course of a season. Luckily, around here, seasons are only 20 games. I know out there, high schools play a little bit more and start a little bit early. So that's the one positive thing. But then they go to travel ball, and then it starts all over again. Now, in some instances, it gets worse. So this was a conversation I had with my cousin Mike. Got a lot of cousins, man. A lot of cousins around here. Everybody's a Beimel. Everybody's a cousin. But it's not Kentucky or Alabama, or where are the kissing cousins? They bring that stuff. It's not like that. Just got a lot of cousins around here. But anyways, West Virginia, maybe. No offense to anyone from those states. But anyways, yeah, I was talking to him, and he's like, hey, will you come in and talk? If I set up a meeting, he's got a travel team called State Line Baseball. So they have they play a little bit and train in Olean, New York, Jamestown, New York, here in the area, St. Mary's, Pennsylvania, and they're going to open another facility in Bradford, Pennsylvania. But he was like, will you come talk to, if we have a meeting with the State Line players and parents, will you come talk to them about this type of thing and why you shouldn't allow this? And I was like, absolutely. I feel like I have to, because I feel we have to talk to as many people as possible and just get this information out there. just to save kids' arms and save them further down the road, because it's like you said, it's always the kids who are good, and they're the ones who are going to go on and play in college. And you hate to see a kid with a ton of potential be a great pitcher as a sophomore. Like I said, sophomore throwing 91. It's pretty awesome. But because he's a sophomore throwing 91, he is getting abused more than anybody.
Yeah.
Because he can win games. And then you'd hate to see by next year him getting surgery or starts to lose velocity because he's, getting super fatigued and he can't bounce back, and he's you get these little micro tears and micro injuries that you don't realize are happening, and until it's too late, until something blows out, and you can't really do anything about it at that point. So I'm just trying to get that information out there. I think is super important, and also I just don't know if it's talked about enough. I'm just seeing all of these things where everyone is vilifying velocity. People have thrown hard for them since the beginning of baseball. And these are the things that are leading to injuries. It's more of this than it is somebody trying to throw hard. Like, I played since I was 4 years old, played baseball. I was always trying to throw as hard as I can. And some of these videos you'll see in the comments, coaches will be like, "Oh, I don't let my kids throw hard." I'm like, what? What are you talking about? You don't let them throw hard? Like, what do you do to them? You just let them throw freaking 20 innings in 2 days? Like, what are you talking about? So it's just, I think we have things backwards. We're vilifying the wrong thing. So, just kind of hand it over to you. When we talk about these things, and you see this stuff on social media with velocity is the reason people are getting Tommy John, and they never mention, this kind of stuff we're talking about right now. What do you usually have a reaction? Do you ever like comment on those kind of videos, or like, what is your reaction when you read stuff like that?
Well, first, I feel like I've had to comment down on social media. I used to comment on so many things, and just, that's not right, and start arguing with people, but you can't kind of get in the weeds in the comment section. That'll just drive you crazy. You lose sleep at night trying to argue with people that you have no idea if they're even a real person.
Yeah.
But the thing you mentioned that really, I hope people picked up on that conversation that you were having, was the behavior
With myself.
Like, you have to understand the behavior. Yeah. But like the behavior an athlete has, it's good though. I mean, there's so many things that I feel like I can interject on, but you're hitting so many key points. And then, I mean, with the delay and the everything, I'm like, I don't want to interrupt. And then we're kind of like back and forth. But the way you said it, the behavior of the way someone's doing something, their just totality of everything they're doing is really what either sets you up for success or puts you at higher risk for injury. And it's never typically just one thing. It's a combination of those things. Velocity obviously is an easy common denominator. Go, oh man, guys are throwing harder, guys are getting more hurt. But that's not the aspect. That's just a part of the puzzle. The volume of throwing, that's another thing. But if that was the only thing, you'd look at some of these, I don't know, Latin American countries. There's guys playing year round. They're throwing, they're playing games all the time. Are they I guess, super resistant group from getting injured? Or is it just the behavior they have, the way they go about their training, and the volume of throwing is monitored, or what exactly is happening? So I think it resonates for me when I start thinking about like the comments that people have or the things that we've experienced, because then I even think of how much we really try to understand what's happening for an individual with the volume of workload they have, the strength they have. We're testing it regularly. There's things like arm care where it can even give you a suggested pitch count based off of all the other things that are connected to your performance. Uh-oh. So this is reconnecting. Did I lose you?
No, I'm still here.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'm just going to keep going then. And it makes me think about some times where we've had athletes that we feel like we know what they have going on, and then we find out, oh man, this guy says his arm's been killing him, and he's been popping Advil and doing pull downs, and we're like, boy, why didn't he say anything? So you can only do so much to present the information. And then as an athlete or as a parent or as an advocate for an athlete, you kind of have to be able to get to some truth about what the behavior actually is. If there's no transparency on pain, then there's very little that you can really pivot on. Velocity itself, I think, is definitely a contributor to fatigue or to risk for injury if you don't have the capacity to do it. Um, One of the easiest things that we've been able to explain to people is the kind of that strength velocity ratio, where you can see kind of what quadrant you're in if you are prepared for the workload of throwing that hard, or if the volume of throwing is starting to limit your strength. So maybe you cannot have the capacity to train for velocity at that point until you get to a certain threshold. What do you think is like one of the things that we've been able to help with guys as they're trying to push for velocity or chase velocity or even just sustain velocity? That can be some helpful advice for an athlete that's not sure whether it's worth risking injury or if they, you know, they can really do that at that point.
I think the biggest thing we've done is when we incorporated arm care into our program, just having that data and going, when we first started, we didn't have it. So we were just basically, I think before guys were starting to do velo with us, they pretty much had to go through like a first phase of a lift just to make sure they had enough like body strength and stuff before we started the
Disconnect.
the velo training or whatever we were doing it with them at that point.
I don't know if I got you there anymore.
No, mine's saying reconnecting now.
Looks like Joe dropped.
Are you there?
It might still be recording. So
Shit.
If he dropped out, let him pick back up his point. What he's saying is about arm care. We have a dynamometer system to where it'll measure the arm strength of an athlete. And we do that every week just to really see what their health is. And then based off of their periodization, if they're looking for velocity or if it's just overall sustainable growth or they're trying to work on command, then we can retest that, have some trend that we can evaluate, and then make a better decision for their program.